Hello there, little masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where this time the good stuff has been replaced with some eggnog and maybe a little mulled cider.
West Hall, my friends. I'm Shawn Marchese, back to being the simple, plain old, real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the Aragorn to my Éomer, Alan Sisto.
Thanks, Shawn. Now, before we begin tonight's show in earnest, I want to take a moment to issue a slight amendment to a previous episode.
That's a nice word for it.
It is. A couple of episodes back when we were talking about Miglin, there was a very scary moment when we almost had to endure Shawn singing "I Want to Know What Love Is" by Foreigner.
Oh, that would have been horrible.
That would have been bad. I made a grievous error at that point. I was trying to refer to Lou Gramm, the lead singer of Foreigner, and I referred to him as Lou Reed, who happened to be the lead singer of Velvet Underground and had a lengthy solo career. Now, the mistake, as you might imagine, is quite understandable. My brain just reached for a male vocalist named Lou, and I grabbed the wrong one.
And how many are there, really?
I know. It was a 50-50 chance.
Can't think of too many.
Shawn, on the other hand, ran with it and thought I must have had some reason for making such a mistake. But going forward, he assures me he'll ask me if that's what I really meant.
Part of it was because you knew of two male vocalists named Lou. I only knew of one, Lou Reed. Truthfully, I really did think that Alan was just... I was talking about how bad of a singer I am, and I thought Alan was just sort of piling on by saying that I wasn't even as good a singer as Lou Reed.
Ooh, that would be pretty bad.
Yeah, hey, I love the man's songwriting.
Oh, yeah. Walk on the Wild Side. Walk on the Wild Side's a classic.
Yeah. A lot of his solo stuff. I love the VU stuff, but he's not really as good a singer as Lou Gramm. So
no.
Kind of misunderstood where we were going with that. But hey, fortunately for all of you listening, you can all hear just how bad of a singer I really am by going to our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, and clicking on our outtakes tab, where we've got some comedy gold posted, as well as one very, very bad Geddy Lee impression by yours truly.
Oh, it is. It qualifies as very bad.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Though I think you actually get to hear my Lou Gramm imitation.
That's right. That is right.
Or, I think it is.
Yeah.
It is.
We'll leave it at that.
So we'll just enjoy it, folks. Have fun. That really, those outtakes, I mean, it's funny. We don't edit much. We really only edit when we butcher things really badly.
It's true, yeah.
We wing it. We really fly by the seat of our pants. You get
And obviously we let some embarrassing mistakes get out there. So,
I think we've realized that actually letting the most embarrassing ones get out there makes people laugh. So
yeah, exactly.
We're enjoying doing that. But
yeah.
We also had a listener reach out to us on Facebook about that episode and make an interesting point about the very end of the chapter on Miglin. Danny H. Suggested, and I really wish we'd caught this distinction. She suggested that Eowl's last words directed to Miglin were a deliberate curse and not a prophecy. And she has a point. Let's go back to that text. It reads, "So you forsake your father and his kin, ill-gotten son. Here shall you fail of all your hopes, and here may you yet die the same death as I." It looks like we have both the traditional prophecy and the curse. We get, "Here shall you fail of all your hopes." And, well, we know that the two biggest hopes he had were to marry his first cousin and become the heir of Turgon. I'm not sure that first one's a very good one.
Just a simple guy, simple dreams.
That's right. Simple pleasures, man. So, we get that, but we also get, "Here may you yet die the same death as I." So it shall you fail, and then here may you yet die. Just a lovely father, this Eowl. Charming fellow.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking, it's class act all the way through.
Yeah.
He makes me think that Finwë and his "my son can do no wrong" delusion makes that guy look like Father of the Year material.
Right. Yeah. Finwë was just too lenient, Eowl was neglectful and abusive, and murderous.
He's not getting a #1 dad mug for Father's Day, I don't think.
Finwë was maybe a bit of a helicopter parent.
Right. But, that's about the worst we can give him.
Man. Man.
But yeah, we really did. We should have caught that distinction between what appears to be a prophecy in the first part and what looks more like a curse in the second bit. So thanks, Danny, for pointing that out. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, really good catch, Danny. Thank you very much for pointing that out to us. And I mean, as you said, I was kind of looking at it just from the prophecy angle. Didn't notice that shift.
Yeah.
But now that I see the shift, all I can think of is his interaction with Curufin earlier in the chapter, where Curufin has a prophecy, and then is actually nice. And is actually nice about it instead of doubling down with a curse.
Well, he even told him about it. He could have just said,
"Yeah,
hey,
right, exactly.
My heart forebodes that if you go, bad things will happen. So go on your merry way."
Yeah, yeah, but you really shouldn't. And so it just makes Eol kind of a bigger jerk than Curufin, which, as far as I'm concerned,
saying something.
That means you got problems.
That's an understatement.
Yeah,
if Curufin's nicer than you are.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Arathel, interesting taste in guys. Though in all fairness, she was, she didn't have a lot of choices once she was in the middle of the forest.
She was tricked by Eol.
She was tricked indeed. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled podcast. Mm-hmm. Tonight, we're picking our heads up out of the Silmarillion, and we're leaving Middle-earth altogether to travel far away to Northmoor Road in Oxford, where Professor Tolkien lived with his family. Tonight, in honor of Christmas and all the other winter holidays that folks are celebrating, we're looking at Tolkien's Letters from Father Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are. And actually, you know what, since you said the words Father Christmas, it's reminded me that since we've already talked about rock vocalists today, I just want to give a quick shout out. The day we're recording this is actually the day that the world learned that Greg Lake of Emerson, Lake and Palmer and King Crimson passed away.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm that's still heavy on my mind right now as I am recording this. After this episode, after we've recorded it, I'm going to go listen to his song "I Believe in Father Christmas." So I recommend you do the same.
Right on.
But back to Tolkien. If you're not familiar with the Letters from Father Christmas, you're really in for a real treat. Basically what it is, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, give you a little bit more background on it, but basically every year for 20 years, Tolkien's children did what a lot of kids do. They wrote letters to the North Pole. But Tolkien actually wrote back as Father Christmas. And of course, being Tolkien, he didn't just write about, Christopher, I'm bringing you, a brand new Silmarillion adaptation. He didn't just write about the presents. He created an entire secondary world up at the North Pole.
You've been very bad this year, Christopher. I'm bringing you a film adaptation.
I'm bringing you a Baron and Luthien film. No, he created a whole world, a whole fantasy story.
With who is Luthien? No, just kidding. Okay, let's not go there. No, let's not.
But yeah,
no child of Tolkien was ever that bad.
No.
Anyway, no. Sorry.
We'll leave that one where it is. But yeah, so you're going to see an entire fantasy world, adventures, quests, talking animals, evil villains, and of course, invented languages.
Well, a Tolkien book without an invented language, I'm not sure that one exists.
Exactly.
Maybe on fairy stories, that's about it.
It's true. Maybe
it really is just an astonishing amount of pure creativity and a lot of fun that's at the heart of these works, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, anyway, before we get into that, Shawn, I just wanted to check, does Bartleman have anything in his bag for us tonight?
He does.
Okay, great.
Since letters are the theme tonight, it kind of felt wrong, not to reach into the mailbag for something. And I looked, and there at the bottom, rattling around in the dust, one of our very first letters that we got from a dear friend of the show, and we've been saving for a special occasion. It's from our old friend Chris M. from Lancashire in England. Lancashire, he's a true Shire dweller. Sorry, I'll be here all night.
Had to go there.
So he actually wrote in regarding Tales from the Perilous Realm.
I think I remember this question. It came, I think, like after our debut, our little promo teaser thing.
After our teaser, he sent this one in, and it's been sitting there because we've been thinking, well, when are we going to get to Tales from the Perilous Realm? Well, the answer is probably never. So I decided to slot it in here, and I think it fits nicely. So,
I think it would.
So Chris asks about Tales from the Perilous Realm. This particular collection of short stories has always been one of my favorites in all literature. My question for discussion would be, how do you believe that the works in Tales from the Perilous Realm influenced The Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, and so forth? Is there an influence there at all? I know in Smith of Wootton Major, especially, the hints to a star on the brow correlate heavily with the tales of the Star of Elendil in The Lord of the Rings, or the Elendilmere. Chris asks, is this the only reference, or do you feel that Tolkien used these shorter stories to perfect a craft?
Good question.
My answer, yes.
You're doing that a lot lately, Shawn. You got to talk a little bit more or something.
All right. No, yes. I mean, certainly, I think Chris is onto something. Maybe we should probably start by explaining exactly what Tales from the Perilous Realm is.
Good idea. I bet most people haven't read it.
Yeah. So it's a collection of short stories and poems that Tolkien wrote over the course of his life. With one tiny exception, they're not related to the Middle-earth Legendarium at all. But some of them are published individually. I think most of them are published individually.
Or in other compilations.
Or in other collections, right. And it was first published as a single volume in 1997. And let's see, I'm trying to remember exactly what all's in the current version.
The current version contains Farmer Giles of Ham, Smith of Houghton Major, Leaf by Niggle, On Fairy Stories, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is the one that in some poems is related to the Legendarium, and Roverandom, but that's the one about the dog. But the original release you mentioned in 97 didn't include Roverandom, which was a standalone novella, if I'm not mistaken. And it also didn't include my personal favorite, which is On Fairy Stories. That was in Tree and Leaf, along with Leaf by Niggle and Mythopoeia.
Right.
So that's what I mean by so many different volumes.
Yeah.
The Tolkien Reader has a lot of these.
Tolkien Reader's got everything except for Smith and Roverandom, I think.
And then it adds, I think that also adds...
Beorhtnoth.
Yeah.
If I'm mispronouncing that, which I probably am.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then...
the retelling of the Battle of Maldon, if you want to put it that way.
Very, very good.
Easier to pronounce Maldon.
The only dramatic work Tolkien ever wrote, I believe.
Oh, and so well done. I cannot wait to get to that one. One of my favorites.
Fantastic.
I love the parallel. Well, never mind. I'm going to go tangent like
we
crazy.
digress.
Oh, there we go.
But yeah, so and the reason I had to ask what all's in it is because I actually don't even have the volume Tales from the Perilous Realm. Okay. I have every one of the things you just named. I've got the Smith and Farmer Giles book. I've got the standalone Roverandom. I've got everything, but I don't have Tales from the Perilous Realm. So
do be sure that if you get it, I actually recommend, this is one thing where I wouldn't recommend getting the first edition from 97, but the newer one, not because it includes Roverandom, but because it's illustrated by Alan Lee, and it's very well illustrated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Excellent work there. So we'll put a link up on the website to the current version, of course, and hopefully that'll help you out if you want it.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for the background. So I guess back to Chris's question. Yes, I really do think that these stories were ways for Tolkien to perfect his craft, as Chris puts it. I mean, it's always hard to nail down exact composition dates when we talk about Tolkien because he spent so many years writing and rewriting. I think actually in some cases, the works that we get in Tales from the Perilous Realm might have actually come after the major works that they resemble.
I'm thinking for many cases, yeah.
I think, Farmer Giles, for example, which is about an ordinary guy who goes off and fights a dragon. Who does that sound like? It was, I think it was written around the same time as The Hobbit, but then it wasn't published until 1949. Yeah. So that was one that, and actually I think it might have been written around the same time The Hobbit was published. I think it was written around 36.
It was written in 36, 37 from what I recall.
So Hobbit would have already been written at least in some form. So that's one that would have come after, and I guess.
And I recommend that book, by the way. If it includes some very funny jokes that maybe only a philologist would get. But if you like the puns that we've talked about, like Finrod being given the name Gnome and some of those others, you definitely want to get your hands on Farmer Giles. Yeah,
that's true. A lot of people. I love that one. I know that's a lot of people's favorite.
Blunderbuss. That's all I'll have to say. Blunderbuss.
That's right. It is Blunderbuss.
You'll get it if you've read it.
Yep. My favorite is Smith of Houghton Major. I think you know that, Al.
Yeah.
And you know why.
I do.
It is, which is one of the last things Tolkien ever wrote. It's got some similarity not only to Elendil and Elendil's jewel that Chris mentioned, but also Eärendil is what I always think of.
Oh, yeah.
With the traveler to fairy with the star on his brow.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
It's totally Eärendil. And, of course, Eärendil was the first thing Tolkien wrote in the Legendarium back in 1914, whereas Smith was written in the 60s. So, again, another case where the Legendarium story came first. But I'm thinking in some cases the Tales version might be might be earlier. I'm thinking Adventures of Tom Bombadil.
Yeah.
Right. That was one of those that it's a series of poems, and those poems were published individually. And that's got the poem Errantry in it, which was published in 1933. And that's the one that's got some similarities to Bilbo's poem about Eärendil that he tells in Rivendell.
Yeah.
It's just got a really similar meter and rhyme scheme, and I think a few of the same passages in it, not too much.
I think the phrasing there's some similar. I'd have to look at it. I have to tell you, I can't recall precisely, but I do remember some reading about some similarities.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like it. If you read Errantry and then you go and read the Eärendil from Fellowship, they sound very similar. But I guess, regardless of what came first, we can chicken and egg all night, I suppose. But I think the true what we truly get from this is that these works were really part of the same mental process or sort of the same thematic consideration that created his major works. And
I agree.
Like maybe something like Smith. I mean, that was one of the last. I think that was the last thing he published in his lifetime. Yeah, and he probably figured, he wasn't going to get the Silmarillion published, and he said, "Well, I want to get a Traveler to Fairy story published.
Somebody's got to get to fairy in my lifetime."
Right, exactly.
I think you're right. No, he had really wanted to get the Silmarillion published, but by that point had pretty much given up hope that it would ever see the light of day. And he definitely wanted to get some story out there about fairy. Or fairy, depending on how you want to spell it. E-R-Y or E-R-I-E.
Or I-E. Or even put a little umlaut over the E.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, great discussion as always, and I appreciate you pretty much taking the lead on Chris's question there. Chris, thanks for submitting that question and for your patience in waiting like 10 months for it to get answered.
Yeah.
Very timely discussion, though, because today we're going to be talking about another non-Middle-earth work that does have some similarities to some things in the Legendarium.
It's almost like we did that on purpose, Alan, isn't it?
Almost. So why don't we go ahead and get to the letters from Father Christmas?
All right.
Let's give a little bit of background so you can understand what this book is. Tolkien had 4 children: John, who was born in 1917, Michael in 1920, Christopher, who I'm sure all of you know, born in 1924, and Priscilla, born in 1929.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Christopher is definitely the one that jumps out out at me. Obviously, we feel like we know Christopher intimately because he's, as the executor of Tolkien's literary estate, he's the only reason that we have, the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, History of Middle Earth, much else.
Yeah, Beren and Luthien, the Lay of
Outro. Right. Priscilla, who's also still with us, she hasn't been quite as prolific in publishing, but I know she's been very involved in the Tolkien Society.
Yeah, she has.
I'm fairly certain that at least one person we know in the UK has met her. And
I think I know who you're talking about. One of our friends in one of the Facebook groups.
Yeah.
He's very well connected. Yeah, she's been to a few of those meetings.
Yeah, so
probably not as many recently, I would guess.
Probably not, no. But I know she was maybe honorary chair of the Tolkien Society for a while.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I just bring that up just because, we as readers have a relationship with Tolkien's children through this kind of stuff. But, we get kind of a different side of that. We see them really as kids a little bit.
We really do. And it starts, the background for this book starts that back in 1920 when John, the oldest, was 3 years old. He asked his father what Father Christmas was like. And so Tolkien responded with a letter from Father Christmas. He didn't do it again until 1923, but then he started writing letters to his kids every year from Father Christmas.
Every year, and at least one letter a year. I mean, some years he wrote multiple letters to the different kids. Some years he wrote multiple letters from different characters. We'll get to some of that.
Yeah, and they weren't just letters. They often included hand-drawn pictures, which is why the volume is such a beautiful volume to look at. A lot of great artwork. There were drawings on the envelopes. They were all addressed from the North Pole, of course. And sometimes they even had special North Pole stamps drawn on them.
Yeah. It occurs to me, I wish we could share some of these pictures.
I know.
You'll just have to go out and get the book, folks.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, the amount of work that he put into these letters to his kids.
I know.
Man, I am a terrible father.
Oh, I thought the same thing when I finished reading this. I was like, man, I better get on it.
I know. I mean, okay, in both of our defense, our oldest are both pretty young.
Yeah.
My son, this is the first year my son's really kind of taking an interest in Santa Claus. So I think I've got a little bit of time to catch up. But
yeah, you're about where I was last year, because my son, your boy's what, 3.5 or so?
3.5, yeah.
Yeah, my son's going to be 5 in February, so he's 4 3/4, as he'll tell you now. And he's been interested in Santa Claus since probably about October of last year. So
we got to get on it. We still have time, but
and my daughter doesn't have a clue yet, so that's
we got
helpful.
some catching up to do. And we're not going to be able to keep it going until they're 14 either. I mean,
no.
Times are different.
Sorry, pal. Well, that's okay. He'll lose faith in Santa Claus, pretty early, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So as the years went by, these letters got more and more elaborate, which makes us feel more and more inadequate.
Exactly.
It's truly true.
And more pictures.
I know. And I was like, wow, I might be able to write my son a letter from Father Christmas. I'm going to spare him. I'm going to spare him trying to draw a picture.
Yeah, really.
Why is Father Christmas a stick figure? Because that's all he can draw. Tolkien started telling a story about Father Christmas and developed this whole cast of characters. The North Polar Bear, not just a polar bear, of course, the North Polar Bear, because they're at the North Pole. Bear, yeah. The North Polar Bear's nephews, Paksu and Valkotuka, and I'm hoping I pronounced that right.
It sounds about right, yeah.
And Father Christmas's elf secretary, Ilbereth. Not Elbereth. This must be Elbereth's younger brother, Ilbereth Gilthoniel.
Our young elven brother.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, it's just so amazing. I mean, this cast of characters just expands. The story starts to continue from one year to the next. He starts, in subsequent letters, he starts referencing the last letter and, say things like, remember how I told you that,
I love that.
It's just great.
It was only a year ago. I actually can't remember a thing, but okay, I'll remember. and he started introducing these characters into the narration themselves. He'd have these other characters write additional paragraphs, or they'd make notes in the margins, little editorial marks, which are just hilarious. Because they're like snipping back at each other. Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah. It's great.
Man. And of course they even, they look different. The handwriting was different.
Yeah. They had different handwriting. They even had different, even different voices as a writer. I mean, the words they use, the way they spell.
The spelling. That's true.
He just really went all out. And, it's what we would expect from Tolkien. I mean, this is the man who talked about inconsistency of reality.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, he really just does it. I mean, it is a secondary world.
It is.
A secondary world of the North Pole.
Even though it only shows up in a few letters a year, if I'm one of those kids, I'm buying it. So these letters continued with changes in who they were addressed to as the boys grew up until 1943. Now, that last letter in 43 was addressed to Priscilla alone, who was 14 at the time, and probably just getting a little too old for the whole Father Christmas thing. Actually, I was reading a little bit in the Hammond and Skull book on that. She actually discovered when she was 10 that he was writing the letters.
Really?
That the boys had kept it a secret. They all had enjoyed it so much they wanted her to enjoy it too. But it took her a while. It was really neat. It was just such a cool little thing to find out how the family handled that. But we now get to enjoy these letters, both printed transcripts and full-color images, thanks to Christopher's wife, Baillie Tolkien. Sorry. Try saying that 5 times fast. Who edited the letters for publication in 1976. So she even beat her husband to the punch for the Silmarillion by a year. Of course, it was probably a little easier to edit these letters.
Oh, yeah. That's true, yeah.
Now, what's funny is that edition that came out in 76, the Father Christmas letters, is the version that I happen to have, which is why I was astonished to find that Shawn was telling me about letters that I'd never read.
Who knew? We started talking about this, and I'm bringing up letters, and Alan is, wait, where's that?
Seriously?
Yeah, so as it turns out, the version that I have is called Letters from Father Christmas. It was published in 1999, and it has several letters and drawings that weren't contained in that original, so that it actually does have a letter for every year except for 21 and 22.
Moral of the story? Don't let your appreciation of first editions blind you to the fact that later editions might have more to enjoy. That's my own. See, I was like, well, if I'm going to have to get this book, I want a first edition because I'm trying to.
Sure, yeah.
I know I'm never going to be able to get a first edition of The Hobbit. I'll have to settle for that facsimile version of the first edition. Right. But, first editions of Smith or Adventures of Tom Bombadil or or Father Christmas letters, they're a little more easily attainable.
Sure.
It's kind of nice to collect those. But yeah, I'm going to have to get the letters from Father Christmas now so that I can actually read the rest of them. Anyway, Shawn,
highly worth it. No,
yeah,
highly
definitely.
worth it.
Definitely. And such a fun little thing to read over Christmas. Definitely, if you are a young parent or if you're about to become one, read it now so that you feel less guilty because you can get on it.
Yeah, right.
If your kids are already teenagers, you will read it and go, man, I'm really terrible.
This is our Christmas and holiday season gift to you folks. Go out and buy this book now if you're embarking on the wonderful journey of parenthood, because
it is awesome.
Great ideas to reuse.
So there's a lot here, Shawn, but what jumped out at you the most while you were reading this book? What was your biggest takeaway from reading this allegedly minor work?
Yeah, allegedly. For me, I think because I'm such a fan of the Middle-earth Legendarium, I think it was just the kind of thing we talked about with Chris's question. I was amazed and pleasantly surprised how many of the story elements and the themes that we see in the Legendarium, came out when he was writing to his children. The Legendarium was not even really getting off the ground at this point. I mean, again, the first poem he wrote about Eärendil was 1914, and this starts in 1920. We're over a decade away from The Hobbit, and I guess we're probably around the time he's working on Book of Lost Tales, because he was working on that during the war. But I don't know. The Legendarium was just getting off the ground, and so much of the stuff that ended up in the Legendarium you start to see here. I don't want to spoil it because I want to get into it when we talk about the passages that each of us have picked out. But I mean, you get invented languages, you get invented alphabets.
Yeah, you do. You're right.
A healthy dose of Finnish.
Yes, you do.
You've got puns, like you talked about the gnome and the stuff you see in Father Giles. You get some of that in here, and just ordinary, relatable characters.
That would be Farmer Giles, not Father Giles.
Did I say Father Giles?
I think you did.
Oh man! Wow.
That's okay. And then we have Farmer Christmas.
Yeah. You didn't know this, Alan, but my father's name is Giles.
Oh, I did not know that.
No, it's not true.
Oh, okay. Wow, you think that would have come up in our brief discussion?
You'd think at some point. No, man, Farmer Giles. But yeah, and you just get some really just nice, ordinary, relatable characters.
Yeah.
North Polar Bear, NPB, or sometimes PB as he's called. He's like as everyman as you can get.
Oh yeah.
Except he's a bear.
Well,
and he gets in these wacky adventures he has no business being in, and I don't know. It's just it is definitely the Tolkien I know from reading the Middle Earth stories.
North Polar Bear sometimes reminds me of like a conglomerate of Sam, Merry, and Pippin.
Yeah.
Getting into trouble, a little oafish. Definitely in over his head. Very
silly, a bit of a trickster.
Yeah.
It's really he messes things up a lot.
But he fixes things too.
Yeah, it's great. So anyway, I mean, there's really a lot there that we'll dig into. That was just sort of my quick overview. I don't know. What about you, Alan? What did you?
Well, for me,
what kind of jumped out at you?
Yeah, there were two things that jumped out. The first was his just amazing sense of humor. I mean, there are some really funny bits throughout this. And especially while we're reading the Silmarillion, it's really helpful to be reminded of that side of Professor Tolkien. I mean,
we need a little humor.
We do need a little humor. But the second thing that jumped out at me was just how, I don't know, privileged I felt reading what was private correspondence between Tolkien and his children. These weren't written for public consumption. These weren't written for his fans. They were for the people on this earth that he loved the most. Yeah. And I'm just grateful the estate saw fit to publish these. I've really enjoyed it, and it's given me a glimpse of a man who truly, truly poured time and love into his kids. Yeah. So I just really love that.
It's inspiring. It's inspiring and it's heartwarming, you know, for a dad.
And it's guilt-making. But
that too. Hey,
but yeah.
Guilt can lead us to make better decisions for the future. Yes,
I'm going to be writing some Father Christmas letters.
Yeah. So I'm going to learn to draw a bear.
Father Christmas nowadays, he's modern. He uses a typewriter and he uses a computer.
He'd probably Photoshop pictures of a bear today.
There you go, and I can do that. So anyway, we're going to get into some specifics. Shawn and I have each chosen a few of our favorite letters. We're going to read through some selections and discuss. We've got 3 or 4 passages each, depending on time, and I'm going to have Shawn start us out.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. I'm actually going to start with the 1923 letter from Father Christmas to John.
Now, I should remind our listeners, by the way, that I think every single one of the letters that Shawn has chosen are only in that second edition that was published later. So if you have the old one like I do, you're going to wonder where this is coming from. Go ahead and buy the new one.
I am so sorry.
So a lot of this is new to me.
Yeah. All right. Well, here we go. We'll see how this goes. All right. North Pole, Christmas Eve, 1923. My dear John, it is very cold today, and my hand is very shaky. I am 1924, no, 7 years old on Christmas Day. Lots older than your great-grandfather, so I can't stop the pen wobbling. But I hear that you are getting so good at reading that I expect you will be able to read my letter. I send you lots of love, and lots for Michael, too. And lots bricks, too, which are called that because there are lots more for you to have next year if you let me know in good time. I think they are prettier and stronger and tidier than pick-a-bricks, so I hope you will like them. Now I must go. It is a lovely, fine night, and I have got hundreds of miles to go before morning. There is such a lot to do. A cold kiss from Father Nicholas Christmas.
Simple to the point. It really is so much simpler than some of the later ones, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. This is not
elaborate at all.
He's just getting revved up with this one.
Yeah, he is.
And this is the 1923 letter. So this is the first of the, of the yearly ones. He did one in 1920 that was very brief. I don't know. There's so many things I love about this one. First thing that jumps out at me, and you can really see this if you have the pictures.
Yeah.
About his shaky hand, the pen wobbling. You can really see in the pictures. I mean, it's a very shaky script that he's using. It's almost hard to read at times because it's so wobbly. Yeah. I love this. This is something you see throughout. I think Father Christmas almost always complains about the fact that he's so cold.
He always mentions that shaking, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And at first I just thought, oh, it's kind of funny. It's so cold. His hand is shaking. It was not until I was a few letters in that I realized Tolkien did this to disguise his own handwriting, I think.
Yep, absolutely.
Brilliant idea. Again, the depth, even this early, the depth of thought that he put into this to disguise his own handwriting so his kids would really get
and yet
that
finding a way that's
belief.
consistent within that world. Right, exactly.
Yeah. Brilliant.
It really is.
He's got the revelation of his age. He's 1924 years old, so he's literally as old as Jesus, as old as Christmas itself. And I was thinking about this, he's not even sure how old he is, 1924, 1927.
In 1923? Yeah.
Yeah, in 1923. So if he's 1927 years old, he would have been born in 4 BC, which is, I think
most experts have narrowed it down to either 3 or 4 BC.
Yeah. So I think that's what's going on there. So
I think it is. He's referencing that little historical oddity.
He's referencing the date of Christ, which is hilarious.
It really is. It's pretty cool. I mean, because that's a calendar oddity. Because the I can't remember now. I just read this not that long ago. I wish I could remember it. But the guy who came up with that calendaring system, the
Julian or the Gregorian,
the Julian calendar, they didn't have access to some of the records that we have, the historical records that we do now, in terms of when Quirinius was the governor of Syria and all of these other things that the Gospels talk about in terms of trying to place it in time. Mm-hmm. But I believe most experts have now narrowed it down to 3 or 4 BC.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
So the odds of it being December 25th are admittedly slim.
Right. We do know that. I think it was what. Well, we're really digressing now.
I know, boy, that is a digression.
Yeah.
So we'll continue.
Wow. So he is literally as old as Jesus Christ. Is literally as old as Christmas itself.
Yeah. Even before Christmas was ever celebrated as Christmas. That's pretty cool.
Exactly. You get the idea that he was just sort of spontaneously popped into existence when, when we're all looking at the nativity scene in the manger.
There's Father Christmas.
Father
around
Christmas
the corner.
is popping into existence up at the North Pole. It's just so cool. The neat little detail. There's this little bit in here about I expect you'll be able to read my letter. John was 6 at this point, so
about right.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, especially if you're the son of a professor who's probably going to be pretty strict in his education of you.
This is quite true. I think my favorite thing about this letter is this mention of this toy that he's bringing.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
The Lots bricks. I guess
pick-a-bricks.
John asked for pick-a-bricks, and Father Christmas is bringing him Lots bricks instead. So I had to go look these up because I don't know anything about early 20th century British toys. But I mean they're just what they sound like. They're building bricks. I think one of them was made of wood, and one of them was actually made of like a resin or something. And I think the Lots ones are the ones he got them that are sturdier. I think those are the resin ones.
Resin-bound artificial stone.
Oh, there you go.
Sold in modern and Tudor style sets.
Yeah.
Wow.
We found some links on these things. We'll put them up on the website.
That's really cool.
It's just neat because it's like, wow, Tolkien got Father Christmas got Tolkien's son building blocks. I mean, and that's like, it's 100 years ago, almost 100 years ago.
Oh my goodness, these are so cool. We've got to get that link up. The picture on the Brighton Toy Museum website actually has the box open. These aren't just bricks. I mean, there's it's all different parts of like the faces of the building. You've got the rooftops, and you've got, that's what they meant by the regular style and the Tudor style.
Right.
Because you could get different, trim. The look was different.
Right.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Oh, they're just, it seems like such a cool toy, and
I'd almost rather have that than Legos.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they're just cooler. It's just, I think just because it's something that we didn't have.
Yeah. The pick-a-bricks look almost more like
almost more like Lincoln Logs or an erector set.
An erector set. That's really what they look like. They look like a primitive, very primitive erector set.
Yeah, because it's all wood, all natural materials and everything.
Right.
I don't know. It's just it's a cool detail because, I mean, again, this is almost 100 years ago, and his son asked for something that my son would ask for. In fact, we're actually getting my son Legos this year. I mean,
that's so cool.
Just, it's one of those little, you can have this connection to Tolkien through this, and that was just so neat.
I agree. That's really cool. I love it. Very human.
Yeah, exactly. Very human. Very very relatable.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then I guess my last observation is just Father Christmas's full name.
Mm-hmm.
Nicholas Christmas.
Right.
Of course.
And
my first thought was, of course, it's Nicholas because he's Saint Nick, right? But I think we actually learn in a later letter that he was actually named after Saint Nicholas.
That's correct.
So that's not confusing at all.
Not at all. Well, we're actually going to square that up because that's the letter that I wanted to tackle, the 1930
Is that what
letter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, good. Well, I segued that nicely for you then.
You did, without even meaning to. The 1930 letter is a little long, so unlike yours, I will not be reading the whole thing, but I will read some portions. I've enjoyed all your letters. I hope you'll like your stockings this year. I tried to find what you asked for, but the stores have been in rather a muddle. You see, the polar bear has been ill. He had whooping cough, first of all. So he goes on to talk about how he couldn't have North Polar Bear help with packing because it would be simply awful if any of my children caught polar whooping cough and barked like bears on Boxing Day. So, for those not in the know, I just want to clarify Boxing Day is the day after Christmas. It's a holiday that's celebrated in most English-speaking nations. I was looking that up. It's like the UK, Canada, well, and all parts of the UK. So in Scotland and in Ireland and in Great Britain and my goodness, and then in England, and then in Australia and New Zealand, and but not here.
Not much of a thing here in the U.S. No.
So the rest of the letter is. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I know. I only know about Boxing Day because I have some family in the UK, and they come for Christmas sometimes, and they always talk about, it's Boxing Day now, and I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Whatever. I guess Boxing Day though is a big retail day now. It's a lot like Black Friday is here.
That
huge,
makes sense,
huge sales. Yeah. Anyway, the rest of the letter in 1930 is filled with North Polar Bear's antics. After recovering from the whooping cough, He's been at his tricks again, quarreling with the snowman, my gardener, and pushing him through the roof of his snow house, and packing lumps of ice instead of presents in naughty children's parcels. That might be a good idea, only he never told me, and some of them with ice were put in warm storerooms and melted all over good children's presents. So I can't help but wonder, this mention of the whooping cough a couple times, the vaccine for which wasn't developed until the 40s, had maybe made its presence felt in the Tolkien family that year.
Oh, wow.
You know, if one of the kids had gotten sick, what a cool way to kind of tie that in.
Right. I don't know. I mean, it's just
like, yeah,
they even have whooping cough.
It's everywhere.
The Pole kids, yeah.
Though there, of course, it's polar whooping cough.
Of course. Well, yes, and you don't want to catch that.
No, my goodness. I mean, they call it the 100 Days cough for a reason. It can last for a very long time.
Probably also a nice way to diminish that if one of the kids had it. It's
exactly.
like, oh, well, at least you didn't have that polar whooping cough.
Right. Well, it could have been so much worse.
Right.
The typical humor about North Polar Bear and his antics are brilliant. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, there's such great stuff. The lumps of ice is awesome. But the real kicker in this letter is the last paragraph. Well, my dears, there's lots more I should like to say about my green brother and my father, old Grandfather Yule, and why we were both called Nicholas after the saint, whose day is December 6th, who used to give secret presents, sometimes throwing purses of money through the window. But I must hurry away. I'm late already, and I'm afraid you may not get this in time. So like Shawn, I have to explore things. Who or what is this green brother that he refers to? I had no clue. Is it, ho, 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 the Jolly Green Giant? I don't think so. I don't... That's for those who don't know. What's that brand? I can't remember. It's a frozen vegetable brand.
Is it? Oh man, Isn't it Green Giant Vegetables?
It's green. No, it's not. That's not the name of the vegetable. The brand.
It's not. You sure?
I don't remember. Anyway, I'll look it up. But yeah, no, that he was.
Yes, it is an American. It's an American advertising icon for frozen vegetables.
Yeah, really. I'm pretty sure that wasn't who Tolkien was referring to. So I did a bit of research, and here's what I found. Okay, and we think of Father Christmas and Santa Claus as one and the same, and really, today that is the case. But history suggests they were once two different persons. To get to that, we have to start first with the real St. Nicholas mentioned here. Was the bishop of Myra in Turkey back in the 3rd century, and according to tradition, he would give money to families by dropping coins down the chimney where they would land in a stocking or a shoe. The primary source, of course, for the modern-day Santa Claus. Well, this image of St. Nicholas, this kind of Santa Claus-y image, came to England along with the Normans, and his story merged with the already existing legend of Father Christmas, though he didn't necessarily have that name at the time, of course, since after all,
because it wouldn't have been a Christian
right. He was part of the pagan pre-Christian.
Well, I guess. I get the Anglo-Saxons
Yuletide. Yeah, but it would have been more Yuletide thing. But we're going to get to more Yule in a minute. That's why I didn't.
They probably were still calling it Yule, even though they were Christianizing at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But according to those stories, this green brother, he wasn't called that, represented the coming of spring and would come to make people happy during the long winter months. So he would show up in the middle of winter, but he'd look very springy. He wore a long green hooded cloak and a wreath of holly, ivy, or mistletoe.
Wow.
So this character eventually became known as either King Winter or King Frost, and that's got to be the green brother that he's referring to. It was really fascinating to dig that out. Yeah, it's kind of this mishmash of cultures in that Christianization of the pagan, when England was still pagan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But there's even more, because now we get Grandfather Yule, right? Yule is a modern English representation of an Old English word that I will absolutely not try to pronounce, but that because I will butcher it. But it's cognate with an Old Norse word, Yule, Jol, with the little symbol over the O, Yule, and relates to a 12-day festival in midwinter. Well, in the Old Norse work, the Edda, which of course Tolkien was familiar with, we know how familiar he was with the Edda, the event Yule is mentioned, and one of the names of the gods is Yule beings. Even Odin himself is named Yolnir, referring to the Yule. So we've got all these references to so many different cultures and histories here, and their winter celebrations. We've got the traditional Christian St. Nicholas. We've got this pagan English character of this, who, the Green Brother, or the
Green Brother,
King Winter. And then we also have the Old Norse. We have Odin present, really, with the Yule idea. So The kind of thing a philologist like Tolkien would absolutely
Yeah, well, exactly.
have done.
Yeah, of course. Even the characters in his children's letters are going to have, they're just going to be this huge philological journey that you're going to go on.
Isn't that just amazing? It's so
I wonder,
cool.
now that you're talking about this green figure, I wonder, I know there's like a green man in Celtic myth, but that's Celtic, not Anglo-Saxon.
Right.
But I wonder if
maybe
that was also part of that. If that it's like the Green Man.
Huh.
I'm sure there's a name for it in Celtic, but but there is I don't know. I have to look into that one. That could be that the Green Man might be a red herring, but that might not be really what we're looking at here. But
it doesn't look like it. It's often related to natural
different.
Vegetative deities, primarily interpreted as a symbol of rebirth.
Okay, so that's more spring.
It's a representation of a face surrounded or made from leaves. So probably not that, but interesting.
Maybe not.
The green,
Still the spring thing. I mean, I guess the color green, you're looking at spring, obviously. Also, you mentioned that Old Norse word yol. I know we've got some listeners in Scandinavia, and I'm sure some of them are probably thinking right now. I think in some of the Scandinavian languages, their word for Christmas is still derived from that. I think their word for Christmas is basically Yule or Yol. Yeah. So if you've got any Scandinavian listeners listening to this, fill us in. Let us know what your word for Christmas is there.
That's pretty cool. Shawn, why don't you go ahead and take the next letter? I want to hear what's the next year you've got for us.
Okay, well, the next one I've got here is from 1929, and there were a couple of letters in 1929, but I'm going to read the one that was sent in November, and this one is not from Father Christmas. This is actually written by the North Polar Bear. So I'm gonna do my bear voice here.
Here we go.
All right. November 1929. Dear boys, my paw is better. I was cutting Christmas trees when I heard it. Don't you think my writing is much better too? Father Christmas is very busy already. So am I. We have had heavy snow, and some of our messengers got buried and some lost. And by the way, he misspells every other word.
Yeah, it's a hilarious thing to read.
Buried is Burried. That is why you have not heard lately. Love to John for his birthday. Father Christmas says my English spelling is not good. I can't help it. We don't speak English here, only Arctic, which you don't know. We also make our letters different. I have made mine like Arctic letters for you to see. We always write, so here he's saying how he writes the letter T, and he's actually drawing it as a runic T, so it's like that, looks like an upwards facing arrow, kind of like if you look at the Hobbit, the maps in the Hobbit, you see the runic letters. So without that explanation, this is not going to make much sense. But
that's a good point.
We always write T for T, and he shows that little runic T.
Right.
And V for you. This is some Arctic language, which means goodbye till I see you next, and I hope it will be soon. Maramesta an nivela tiento, yarato nea. PB.
Wow.
That
sounds positively Quenya.
Oh, yes, it does.
Or Finnish, as the case may be.
Right, exactly. And then after he signs, he actually has a little P.S. My real name is Karhu, but I don't tell most people. P.S. I like letters and think Christophers are nice.
Oh, that is awesome.
I love it.
That's so cool.
He leaps off the page. I mean, and the picture of the letter, it's actually, it almost looks like it's written on a postcard. I don't know. I have to look into that. But on both sides of a postcard, maybe. But yeah, he writes it in, angular, runic looking script. It's just so cool looking. He's got little, little designs on it.
Yeah.
So just a couple of notes about this one. So this one's addressed to the boys because Priscilla was just a baby at the time.
Right.
She was born in 29. As you mentioned, this is not the first time he appears, but this is the first time that he's I think this is the first time he's written his own letter to the children. He's inserted some by this point he's inserted little paragraphs and notes in some of the other letters.
Sure.
But I just love this one. I love the thing about his paw.
I know, isn't that cool?
Hurting his paw cutting Christmas trees, because in the next letter, which I'm not going to read, but
Right.
Father Christmas actually explains
Tells the whole
more
story.
Right, tells the whole story of how he hurt his paw.
Oh, man.
Man, it's just so cool. The misspellings are
Oh,
fantastic.
they're brilliant.
I mean,
They're perfect.
YWHI, busy, BISY, language, LANGWIDGE.
Language. I love it. That's awesome.
Language.
I
It's
wish I had
great.
that letter in my book. I'm so sad that I don't. I do have the runes, though. Do you have that? Like the last page of my book is the list, the runes, and you could then use that to translate the letter if you wanted to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's actually that is the Goblin alphabet, right?
Oh, you're right. That's not the Arctic alphabet. It's the Goblin alphabet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you translate that one, it probably says "buy more Ovaltine."
Oh, well done.
Oh, sorry.
Well done.
That really is old. By the way, just so you all know, that is even before my time. Okay, I'm not that old.
Still, a lot of people know it from A Christmas Story.
From A Christmas Story. That's correct. Which is where I know it from, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know it from buying Ovaltine in a Dakota ring. But we digress.
You're not quite Beor the Old enough.
Not quite.
So yeah, I don't know, I just love it. You know, his misspellings, you know, he explains Father Christmas complains about his bad spelling.
Yeah.
And I guess I really got to get to my favorite thing about this, which, you know, you pointed it out, Alan. It's the language. It's the Arctic language, which is clearly Quenya, or an early version of Quenya.
Yeah, sure sounded like it.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I don't know. It just you see it here as he's been working on this language for a few years. He worked on it before he even knew it was going to be part of his legendarium, and so it shows up here in this letter to his kids.
Yeah.
The other thing I feel like I need to point out is just a note about the name Arctic. I'm gonna word nerd out on you a little bit here.
Please do. That's why I hired you. For
so
$0 per episode.
That's right. It's all about the glory.
There you go.
So the name Arctic, if you're a word nerd, this is a fantastic pun. So our word Arctic, Arctic Circle, is actually from the Greek word Arctikos, which comes from Arctos, bear.
Okay.
So Arctikos means, ursine or bearish.
Okay.
And, if you know your astronomy, you probably know that the reason the Arctic region is called the Bear region because
took me a second, but yeah.
Yeah, there's the Ursa Major and Ursa Minor are the constellations you traditionally use to get to the north.
Right. Big Dipper, here in America we call them Big Dipper and Little Dipper.
The Big Dipper and Little Dipper.
Plow, right? Plow and sickle?
I think it's the plow in the UK. I think in Lord of the Rings it's the sickle or the wain or the Valakirka.
Valakirka, yes, the Valakirka. I remember that.
Yeah, but the ancients, and still the astronomical names are Ursa Major, Ursa Minor. They were seen as bears.
Bear. Yeah.
So Tolkien is obviously aware of this. He knew his Greek.
Oh, of course.
And so he's using this word Arctic. So the word Arctic here, it means North Polish, but it also means bearish.
Bearish, of course. Because it's the bear's language. That's brilliant.
It's the bear's language, exactly. North Polar Bear, that's a great pun name anyway. North Pole, Polar Bear. But then to work this Greek in there and get that pun on, Arctic, meaning North Pole, meaning bear. I mean, that's just level 100 word nerd right there.
He's max level right there.
Yep.
That's good stuff. Exactly. That really is. I love that. I love the bear's writing. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, it's awesome. Oh, and then there's this mention of his name, Karhu, which my sources tell me is Finnish for bear. So
I'll have to trust your sources.
I have to trust my sources on that one too.
My Finnish is very rusty. Very rusty.
My Finnish is non-existent.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I meant.
Yeah. Yes,
wow.
Indeed.
Well, let's see. The next letter I'm going to read is from just a few years after that. That was 1929. So this one's 1933. So by this point, I don't think he's writing to John, who's going to be 16. Michael would be 13. Christopher would be 9. And Priscilla would be 4. So certainly it's going to be to those two that this is going to be addressed for the most part. the reason I chose this one is it seems to have the most, the biggest and most vivid description of the conflict with the goblins. The worst attack we've had for centuries. They've been fearfully wild and angry ever since we took all their stolen toys off them last year and dosed them with green smoke. Well, you dose me with green smoke, I'm going to be pretty ticked too, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
You remember the red gnomes promised to clear all of them out. There was not one to be found in any hole or cave by New Year's Day. But I said they would crop up again in a century or so. They have not waited so long. Well, I think you and I know his problem, right? He should have gotten the blue gnomes.
Right, of course. Yeah. I don't know why you trust those red gnomes.
Those guys, man, the blue gnomes.
You can't trust them.
I'm here to.
The blue gnomes are on point. They're
right.
Yeah.
they're like the special forces, but all because they're always able to get the red gnomes. Soon after All Saints' Day, and that's November 1st after All Hallows' Eve. So, just again, I want to make sure people get the references to certain holidays. I did Boxing Day, All Saints' Day.
Right.
Polar Bear got very restless. He now says he smelt nasty smells, but as usual, he didn't say anything. He says he didn't want to trouble me. He really is a nice old thing, and this time he absolutely saved Christmas. He took to sleeping in the kitchen with his nose towards the cellar door, opening on the main stairway.
Cellar door.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Cellar door.
I got to point out cellar door.
I love that. You're absolutely right. I missed that, but that's that beautiful phrase.
That phrase that was it the English and Welsh essay he described as the most beautiful phrase in the English language. I don't think he actually came up with that idea. I think he was somebody else did it before him, but he is often credited with it. But somebody did it before him. I have to look that up. But
yeah,
anyway,
I don't know.
We digress. Cool. But yes, he definitely talked about it.
Yeah. So that cellar door opened on the main stairway down into the big stores. But then it gets good. One night, just about Christopher's birthday, which is November 21st, I woke up suddenly. There was squeaking and spluttering in the room and a nasty smell. I caught sight of a wicked little face at the window. Then I really was upset, for my window is high up above the cliff, and that meant there were bat-riding goblins about, which we haven't seen since the Goblin War in 1453 that I told you about. Okay, so first we get the reference to Christopher Tolkien's birthday, which is cool. Very kind of Father Christmas to recognize this. He would have been 9 years old. But second, we get this idea of bat-riding goblins. Now, I know we don't see goblins riding bats in the Legendarium, but first we do see them riding wargs. And we definitely see bats as evil creatures in The Hobbit, where they appear en masse in the Battle of the Five Armies, and in the Silmarillion. So we get this idea of certain creatures, certain animals that have evil tendencies that ally themselves to the goblins.
Right. Yeah.
And I just, I both thought of both the flying bats, like the ones in Battle of Five Armies, but also, I don't know about bat riders, but we've got warg riders. And, there's certainly that alliance. We know.
Well, and the bat thing reminds me of Thuringwethil.
That's exactly what I was going to say, except I probably would have butchered the name.
I might have.
And I know we haven't gotten to that story yet, but
right. It also reminds me of the early conception of Nienna from the Book of Lost Tales, when she was kind of evil, and she had the house made of the roof of her house was made of bat wings because she was like this gothic death goddess.
I've forgotten all about that.
Yeah,
and I'm kind of glad I forgot. I wish you hadn't reminded me.
It's what I'm here for.
I'm not going to complain anymore about her crying.
Right.
Maybe she cried because she read what she was going to be.
Maybe she cried to wash off all the black eyeliner.
Oh. All right, so now this is a stretch. I'm just going to admit flat out this is a stretch. But because I tend to think that Tolkien doesn't write anything by accident, when he said that we haven't seen this since the Goblin War in 1453 that I told you about, I had to look up what happened, what historical events happened in 1453. Well, the one thing I found out is that was the last battle and the end of the 100 Years' War with the French. Now,
that's interesting.
Are French goblins? I don't know. I don't know. It may have totally been random. 1453 sounds random. But isn't that interesting?
That is interesting. And first thing that jumps out at me is goblin is a French-derived word.
True.
In the English language. It's part of why he stopped using it after The Hobbit.
Right, exactly.
Right. But I didn't think of that with 1453. What I thought of with 1453 was the fall of Constantinople.
I thought about that too, the siege and fall of Constantinople, but I was thinking more English history.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Tolkien doesn't really. I mean, I guess there's there are probably some references to Constantinople in the legend. Well, I think definitely some sort of things based on Constantinople in the Legendarium. But
yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I mean, it does seem like English history would be closer to home for him. I just didn't know about the 100 Years' War.
Isn't that interesting? It could definitely be either one. I mean, but the fact that both of those things happened in 1453 make me think that mention of that year was not an accident.
Oh, yeah. No, I think you're right. I don't think he does anything by accident.
So anyway, back to the book. I was only just quite awake when a terrific din began far downstairs in the store cellars. It would take too long to describe, so I have tried to draw a picture of what I saw when I got down, after treading on a goblin on the mat. Only there was more like 1,000 goblins than 15. That was Polar Bear's interjection. And then Father Christmas has an aside to him, but you could hardly expect me to draw 1,000. And then he goes on. Polar Bear was squeezing, squashing, trampling, boxing, and kicking goblins sky high and roaring like a zoo, and the goblins were yelling like engine whistles. He was splendid. Say no more. I enjoyed it immensely. We get some more of this awesome interjection conversation between Father Christmas and Polar Bear.
I love that so much. Yeah.
And we'll get a little more of that in a little bit. But first we get more of the battle description. The ground was black with goblins under the moon when we looked out, and they had broken up my stables and gone off with the reindeer. I summoned help. There were several battles. Every night they used to attack and set fire to the stores before we got the upper hand, and I am afraid quite a lot of my dear elves got hurt. I've been very short of messengers. Lots of my people are still away. I hope they will come back safe, chasing the goblins out of my land, those that are left alive. It's very vivid imagery, but also I love that he points out the very practical stuff, like, well, now I'm short of messengers and supplies.
Well, and that it occurs to me that he was probably his way of apologizing for maybe not sending letters.
All the gifts, or
or all the gifts. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm thinking. Is he's like, well, it's kind of been a rough year.
Yeah.
And then finally, I mean, again, there were a couple other letters where he does the same thing, where he kind of talks about the stores are low,
Yeah.
It kind of makes me think you didn't get everything you asked for, boys.
Right, exactly.
And then he wraps it up with there's a little
good
more
tips for parents. Tips for parents.
Exactly. Man, now I need to write these letters just so I can not buy everything he asks for.
I know. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's been such a terrible year. We have made nothing. I've had workers on strike.
Right.
Elf Local 713 has been striking, and I can't get the scabs to come in.
And then the power went out in the factory. We couldn't get it started up.
And these environmental regulations are just killing us. Anyway, thanks to Polar Bear and the gnomes, there can't be very many goblins left at all. And Father Christmas, I wish I could draw or had time to try. You have no idea what the old man can do. Lightning and fireworks and thunder of guns. Polar Bear certainly has been busy helping Double Help, but he's mixed up some of the girls' presents with the boys in his hurry. We hope we've got all sorted out. But if you hear of anyone getting a doll when they wanted an engine, you will know why.
Oh my!
It cracks me up.
So great.
Isn't that awesome? It's almost like he's, I don't remember. I wrapped these presents in November.
I don't remember. We didn't put names on the presents,
and I forgot to put names. So I think Priscilla's getting a train and Christopher's getting a doll. And man, at least now you'll know why.
Yeah. It's great.
And the spelling of Polar Bear again, we get lightning is L-I-T.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Litening.
Ning, yeah.
And fireworks just has the E and the R transposed, so it's F-I-E-R works.
And fireworks, I don't know. There's a couple of references to fireworks throughout this.
We're going to get some more later. There's some more stuff about like cannons and stuff like that, and gunpowder, and which is kind of interesting given Tolkien's position on kind of modern weapons of war. But that's it for that letter. So
I just want to point out while we're on that letter that this is the letter that has one of the greatest pictures I've ever seen in my entire life. Which is a picture of the picture of polar bear trampling on goblins. You see like this great big polar bear, and the goblins are maybe knee high.
Yeah, and they're like throwing them everywhere.
Yeah, throwing them everywhere. He's got one in his left hand. He's got one in his right hand. He's throttling it. There's goblins flying in the air. It's great. It's so vivid. And the red elves and the red gnomes are running around, or maybe they're elves. I don't know.
I think if they're red, they're the gnomes. Yeah.
Oh, it's just such a great picture.
It really is.
I love North Polar Bear, and this is my favorite picture of him.
Well, I think my favorite picture of him is the one where he's slid down the stairs.
Falling down the stairs.
He's got all the
yeah, you're right.
Over.
As soon as I said that, I remembered that one.
But this is pretty close to my favorite. So
yeah.
We could probably, I'm trying to think, fair use and not falling afoul of copyright. I think we could put a couple of those pictures up on the site, but again, just a couple. I don't want to be in any problems,
exactly.
and they will link them directly to where you can buy the book.
Yep. So sounds good.
All right, fire away with the next letter.
All right. Well, so the next one I'm going to, it's a bit of a long one. I think I'm only going to read one small part of it here because I really want to spend more time on the last couple of letters here.
Sure.
But so this is the letter from 1935, and this one is addressed to the children, or my dear children. At this time, I think John was 18, Michael was 15, so they probably
yeah, probably not.
Probably mostly Christopher and Priscilla here. Yeah. I'm going to read just a little bit from near the end. Actually, it's a great letter. I would love to read because there's a lot of more of that back and forth between. This is one where Polar Bear kind of marks things in the margins.
Yeah.
Making fun of Father Christmas's comments, but I'm just going to kind of zoom in on the end here.
Sure.
So this is Father Christmas speaking. I send you all, John and Michael and Christopher and Priscilla, my love and good wishes this Christmas. Tons of good wishes. Pass on a few if you don't want them all. Polar Bear, in case you don't know what PB is, sends love to you, and to the Bingos, and to Orange Teddy, and to Jubilee. Oh, yes, I learn lots of news, even in snowy weather. My messengers will be about until the new year, if you want to write and tell me everything was all right. I hope you enjoy the pantomime. Your loving Father Christmas. P.S. Paxu and Valkatuka are well again. Only mumps. They will be at my big party on St. Stephen's Day with other polar cubs, cave cubs, snow babies, elves, and all the rest. One thing that you didn't get when I'm reading it, because it's not in the transcript, but you can see it in the picture, is when Father Christmas says Polar Bear, in case you don't know what PB is. Well, first of all, that's like the fifth time in the letter that he said that. Like, hey, in case you've forgotten PB, but Polar Bear is written in the margin, stupid joke. So like throughout the letter, every time Santa makes this little joke, it's like such a dad joke. Like, oh yeah. PB, you've probably forgotten PB, but if you don't remember, and every time PB marks in the margins, silly again, and then finally this is the last time, and he just writes stupid joke.
Oh man.
Which is fantastic.
Brilliant stuff. I love that. It's
yeah. But I don't know. There's just some fun stuff, tons of good wishes. Pass on a few if you don't want them all.
Now, what's this about the pantomime?
This is my favorite part, and this is the reason I really wanted to bring this in, because I'm like pantomime. I've read about pantomime recently, and I don't really know much about pantomime. I think this is more of an English thing. But I mean, it is a kind of drama. In fact, Tolkien mentions pantomime in On Fairy Stories. And I am going to go back to On Fairy Stories.
I think I remember this.
Yeah.
It's in the part about where he's talking about drama and how it's kind of got a weakness.
And exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he goes so far as to call pantomime a bastard form of drama.
Wow, that's really strong language.
Pretty intense. But anyway, I'm going to read from just a bit from On Fairy Stories here. Mm-hmm. He says, I once saw a so-called children's pantomime, the straight story of Puss in Boots.
Man, he can't even start out like, straight-faced on this. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's all right. It's all right. It's so true. The straight story of Puss in Boots, with even the metamorphosis of the ogre into a mouse. Had this been mechanically successful, it would either have terrified the spectators or else have been just a turn of high-class conjuring. as it was, though done with some ingenuity of lighting, disbelief had not so much to be suspended as hanged, drawn, and quartered.
That's the line. That's the line, because that's what I think of when I think of, well, some of the film adaptation.
Right, exactly, yeah.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah.
Is this the pantomime? Yeah.
I think, and it could be. I don't know. It does seem like that was a traditional thing to take your kids to a pantomime around Christmas if you're in England.
Really? I never would have known that.
Yeah, and I did. I don't have any proof that this is the pantomime, but I did find a Telegraph article from 2010 that says that Puss in Boots was one of the top 10 Christmas pantomimes in the UK. So it could be. I don't know. Maybe some of our UK listeners can tell us.
Please pipe in on that.
Is
wow.
Puss in Boots pantomime like here in the US we might go see the Nutcracker or Trans-Siberian Orchestra or something like that around Christmas.
There are Christmas traditions. That's true.
Yeah, is this something like that? Do people really go see Puss in Boots a lot? This might be that. I don't know if it.
This should be where I inform you that my 4-year-old son has recently loved the movie Puss in Boots, which apparently has very little to do with the actual story. I don't know that there's an ogre or a mouse. All I know is there's Antonio Banderas as a cat. And
that's right. I remember. There's a
in Boots.
It's sort of a spin-off of the Shrek movie.
Yeah, it's a Shrek. Right? Yeah. It's a Shrek franchise, right? Because it's that same character. Yeah. They call me the Ginger Hitman. Frisky 2 times.
That's pretty good.
Anyway, Banderas is I have to give him some props as a VO guy. He does a great job in that. But the movie's horrible.
That's awesome.
I'll just tell you, oh man, I hate it. I do not like that movie.
I'm sure it's not made any better by having to watch it,
Well, that's the thing. No movie is good when I have to watch it, 4 times a week. Again, I'd let her scratch my eyes out.
Yep.
Oh, I digress. My daughter, I just tell you this. Yeah, because parenting. After tonsillectomy, my daughter watched Frozen something like on average of 2.4 times a day for 10 days.
Oh, wow.
I'm not kidding. I think it was 23 or 24 times in the 10 days.
Wow.
Just don't get me near that TV again. Just keep me upstairs.
You really did start wanting to build a snowman after a while.
I'm going to kill
anything
you now.
to get out of the house.
Seriously. Well, thankfully it was my incredibly patient in-laws who showed it to her most of the time. It just meant that me and my wife were the ones who had to wean her off of it.
Right.
But yeah, she would keep signing for it, because she can't talk yet. So she would keep signing it. She wanted it. And we figured out what she was signing. She was signing ice cream.
Oh,
but what she meant was, I want to watch Frozen.
Oh, that's awesome.
So anyway, I really digressed. But I love that, the whole thing about children's pantomime and this idea that maybe this was the pantomime that made him call that particular genre.
This was the pantomime that made him think, wow, pantomime is terrible.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. And what a cool letter.
In which case, Father Christmas says, I hope you enjoy the pantomime.
Yeah.
Sounds like he didn't. Sounds like Dad did not.
Yeah. I love the stupid joke banter. I love that. That's Oh man. And I'm sorry that I digressed, but that was just, I had to.
No, it's good.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to tackle this one. There's not a lot of commentary. It's just a really funny example. I'm going to go to the 1938 letter. It's the only one, at least in my volume, that is all verse. It's all all poem. So I'm going to try to do my best. It's in a kind of an odd, I have to say, I'm not sure how to read this meter, but I'll do my best. You all will wonder what's the news, if all has gone well, and if not, who's to blame, and whether Polar Bear has earned a mark good, bad, or fair for his behavior since last winter. Well, first he trod upon a splinter, and went on crutches in November, and then one cold day in December he burnt his nose and singed his paws upon the kitchen grate, because, without the help of tongs, he tried to roast hot chestnuts. Wow, he cried, and used a pound of butter, best, to cure the burns. Just rhyming nonsense. It was a nail. Rusty, too. The goblins, you'll be glad to hear, have not been seen at all this year, not near the pole, but I am told they're moving south and getting bold, and coming back to many lands and making with their wicked hands new mines and caves. But do not fear, they'll hide away when I appear. And then a postscript by Ilbereth that's worth reading in its entirety. Now Christmas Day has come round again, and poor Polar Bear has got a bad pain. They say he swallowed a couple of pounds of nuts without cracking the shell. It sounds a polarish sort of thing to do, but that isn't all between me and you. He's eaten a ton of various goods and recklessly mixed all his favorite foods. Honey with ham, and turkey and treacle, and pickles with milk. I think that a week'll be needed to put the old bear on his feet. And I mustn't forget his particular treat, plum pudding with sausages and Turkish delight, covered with cream and devoured at a bite. And after this dish he stood on his head. It's rather a wonder the poor fellow's not dead. And Polar Bear's brilliant reply, "Absolute rot. I have not got a pain in my pot. I do not eat turkey or meat. I stick to the sweet, which is why, as all know, I am so sweet myself, you thinuous elf. Goodbye."
I love it.
And
great.
thinuous, of course, is just one of Tolkien's brilliant wordplay creations. It's a pun on fatuous.
Thinuous,
But
right?
it's
Yeah.
thinuous.
Thinuous. Because, of course, NPB would, make up a word like thinuous.
He'd look at an elf and he'd make it up. I love that it was a polarish sort of thing to do.
Yeah.
Swallowing
Yeah.
a couple pounds of nuts in the shells.
Ilbereth versus NPB, they have some of the best.
The banter is...
Yeah, it's great. In fact, when we get to mine in a minute, I've got a little bit of that.
You've got some good stuff.
It's worth pointing out Ilbereth's handwriting, since we've talked about the different characters kind of having their own handwriting. His handwriting is a very, very even cursive.
Yes,
so
very
precise. It's not the shaky hand of Father Christmas. It's not this angular runic print of the bear. It's very precise. I mean, he is supposed to be Father Christmas's secretary,
right?
His scribe, if you will.
Yeah.
So he is
amanuensis. Is that amanuensis?
Very good, very good word. Amanuensis. Oh, nice.
Pulling out the word nerdery right there.
Yes. Man, amanuensis. But yeah, it's just a very, really even, really straight lines, really just,
yes.
He's very, you said precise, very particular.
Fastidious.
Fastidious is a good word. That's the word I was looking for earlier.
Yeah. I'm good at finding words.
Yes, you are. You would make a good amanuensis.
Oh, well played. So you've got one more letter for us, right?
I do. It's you know what? Actually, it's the previous year's letter.
I think you're right.
And it is let's see, what year are we looking at? 1937.
Yeah.
Yep. And so this is another one to Christopher and Priscilla.
Right.
And it's, again, very long. Not going to read the whole thing.
Right.
But I will read a pretty good little stretch of it here.
Okay.
If we've got the time. I think
we do. We're at about an hour 20 right now, so we'll be all right.
All right. So this is, I don't know, maybe I'm about halfway through the letter, and Ilbereth is stepping in to finish the letter for Father Christmas.
Okay.
And we're also going to get to see a little bit of back and forth between Ilbereth and North Polar Bear, as I said.
Right.
Dear children, I am Ilbereth. I have written to you before. I am finishing for Father Christmas. Shall I tell you about my pictures? And he's accompanied his letter with 9 different pictures on one page. Again, I'm a terrible father. And I'll describe some of the pictures in here so you sort of follow along as you can.
Sure.
Polar Bear and Velkatuka and Paksu are always lazy after Christmas. Or rather, after the St. Stephen's Day party. Father Christmas is ringing for breakfast in vain. Another day where Polar Bear, as usual, was late. Not true. Paksu threw a bath sponge full of icy water on his face. Polar Bear chased him all round the house and round the garden, and then forgave him because he had not caught Paksu, but had found a huge appetite. We had terrible weather at the end of winter and actually had rain. We could not go out for days. I have drawn Polar Bear and his nephews when they did venture out. Paksu and Velkatuka have never gone away. They like it so much that they have begged to stay. It was much too warm at the North Pole this year. A large lake formed at the bottom of the cliff and left the North Pole standing on an island. I have drawn a view looking south so the cliff is on the other side. It was about midsummer. The North Polar Bear, his nephews, and lots of polar cubs used to come and bathe. Also seals. North Polar Bear took to trying to paddle a boat or canoe, but he fell in so often that the seals thought he liked it and used to get under the boat and tip it up. That made him annoyed. The sport did not last long as the water froze again early in August. Then we began to think of this Christmas. In my picture, Father Christmas is dividing up the lists and giving me my special lot. You are in it. North Polar Bear, of course, always pretends to be managing everything. That's why he is pointing. But I am really listening to Father Christmas, and I am saluting him, not North Polar Bear. Rude little errand boy. We had a glorious bonfire and fireworks to celebrate the coming of winter and the beginning of real preparations. The snow came down very thick in November, and the elves and snowboys had several tobogganing half-holidays. The polar cubs were not good at it. They fell off, and most of them took to rolling or sliding down just on themselves. Today, but this is the best bit. I had just finished my picture, or I might have drawn it differently. And better. Polar Bear was being allowed to decorate a big tree in the garden all by himself and a ladder. Suddenly are heard terrible growly, squealy noises. We rushed out to find Polar Bear hanging on the tree himself. You are not a decoration, said Father Christmas. Anyway, I am a light, he shouted. He was. We threw a bucket of water over him, which spoilt a lot of the decorations, but saved his fur. The silly old thing had rested the ladder against a branch instead of the trunk of the tree. Then he thought, I will just light the candles to see if they are working. Although he was told not to. So he climbed to the tip of the ladder with a taper. Just then the branch cracked, the ladder slipped on the snow, and Polar Bear fell into the tree and caught on some wire, and his fur got caught on fire.
Oh, my.
Poor joke. Luckily, he was rather damp, or he might have fizzled. I wonder if roast polar is good to eat. Not as good as well-spanked and fried elf. The last picture is imaginary and not very good, but I hope it will come true. It will if Polar Bear behaves. I hope you can read my writing. I try to write like dear old Father Christmas without the trembles, but I cannot do so well. I can write Elvish better. And then, after I can write Elvish better, he's got Tengwar. There's a little passage of just a sentence of Tengwar.
Of course there is.
I love it. That's just such a fun. There's just so much fun stuff there. You get to see North Polar Bear and his antics, his clumsiness, setting himself on fire in the tree.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's classic.
It's funny. Part of this letter is in my book, but not all of it.
Oh, really?
I recognize little paragraph or little sections, but none of North Polar Bear's little banter is included. That well-spanked and fried elf is pure genius. I wish I'd seen that in mine.
I love that. It sounds like you could hear Gimli saying that to Legolas.
Well-spanked and fried elf.
Yeah, right.
And
or
complete with spittle coming from the mouth,
Right.
I'll be dead before I see the ring in the hands of an elf.
The John Rhys Davies spittle going everywhere. I love that scene. Yeah, or you could even hear one of Thorin's dwarves saying that to one of Thranduil's guys.
Or maybe I'm thinking Keeley might like a little well-spanked elf.
Oh yeah, Hey, all right.
I may be short, but I'm kinky. Anyway.
Maybe not fried.
No, that's why I left that part out, just the spanked part.
Just the spanked part.
Oh, man.
So cool. I'm going
to regret that joke. I'm going to regret that joke. I just want you to know that.
Oh, no, that's all right. No, it was beautiful. It was well done. There's one of the pictures. I'm looking at the pictures now, and I'm realizing now that there's this one picture when Ilbereth talks about the snow melt and the North Pole, which is a literal pole.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, it's on the cover of the first edition. You've got the Aurora Borealis behind the North Pole.
Okay.
That's what that picture is.
And so you've got the picture of the the water surrounding the North Pole.
Well, it's not that one. It's because the one with the water surrounding it. I do have that picture, but that's not the one on the cover. Yeah, that's the one that's looking south, right? With the cliff on the left?
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cliff's on the left. I don't know. I'm reminded of nothing so much as I guess, a little bit of Tyrion upon Tuna, and I'm also Orthanc. I'm looking at it now.
Oh,
It's like
Orthanc, yeah, definitely.
it's totally Orthanc right there.
Yeah, you're right, it is.
But I don't know. Of course, you know me. My favorite bit here was this Tengwar.
Oh, yeah, you're not kidding.
I can write Elvish better. And then there's the Tengwar.
Polar bear.
It's a
Polar bear, can you make out any writing? It's some form of Elvish.
Some sort of Elvish.
I cannot
I can't read it.
Well,
There
that's
are
because you're
few
polar bear.
who
You can't read.
There are few who can. The language is that of Mordor.
Oh, my goodness.
Believe it or not, it is actually quite hard to read. I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just the way it got printed or what, but Ilbereth's hand. He says his hand is kind of spidery, and it is actually.
It
but,
is very spidery. Yeah.
I looked closely enough, and with some help from the interwebs,
Ooh, those interwebs.
I think I've got this translated as "A very Merry Christmas to you all."
Oh, wow.
It's not actually written in Quenya. It's just
No.
English.
So it's English
Tengwar.
words with Tengwar, yeah. Which is what
Tengwar,
I used to
written
do
phonetic.
with the which is what I used to do with the dwarvish runes when I was
Okay.
first reading, the Lord of the Rings. I would write messages in English, but with dwarvish runes.
Right. Yeah, I did the same thing with the Tengwar, and occasionally with the Hobbit runes.
Yeah.
Which are more like the real Germanic runes. I never could grasp the Elvish runes. Oh, well, you said dwarvish runes. That's the ones
Dwarvish
I'm
runes,
thinking.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking you were talking about the Kirith. But
No.
I used to use those dwarvish runes too sometimes, and then the Tengwar. So I don't know. It's just fun. I love it. It's just these reminders that oh yeah, this is Tolkien. I am reading
At least
Tolkien.
this one didn't say buy more Ovaltine, right? That's all you needed to know.
No, exactly.
Oh, man. Good stuff. I love that. I absolutely love that. The rude little errand boy is just brilliant.
I know, it's great.
The banter between those two is hilarious.
Yeah.
For my fourth one, and I've got a lot of stuff here, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. I want to look at the letter that's marked last letter in my volume. My understanding is it's actually a conflation of the one that he wrote in 1941 and then the truly last letter that he wrote in 1943.
Oh, okay.
By this point, the letter is written solely to Priscilla. She would have been 13 at the time, and so obviously the only one. And by this point, even she didn't believe in Father Christmas, but she, was certainly happy to receive these letters.
Sure.
This is poignant for two reasons. Of course, there's the war, and then the fact that it is the end of this tradition. It's a beautiful family tradition that at this point had been going on. When did you say the first one was? 1923? So this is 20 years?
23 was when the annual series started.
Right.
Yeah, the first one was 20, but 23 was when he started doing it every year.
For 20 years regularly and for 23 years otherwise. That's a really long, family tradition. So there's some poignancy there. But
oh yeah, definitely. You mentioned the war. So this was 1943. Was Christopher already fighting? Was he off to the war at this time?
Let's see, 1943. Well, yeah, I think he would have been. He would have been 19. So I don't know for sure. I'd have to look that up. I actually don't know.
I'll see if I can find anything on it while you.
Well, I think the first part of the letter is from 41, so he wouldn't have been yet because at that point he would have been 17.
Okay.
I think only the very end of this letter, what looks to be a single letter in this volume, I think only the last portion is from 1943. I think the rest is from 41. So Father Christmas first points out one of the realities of war. After thanking them for their letter, he acknowledges that the number of children who keep up with me seems to be getting smaller. I expect it is because of this horrible war, and that when it is over, things will improve again, and I shall be as busy as ever. But at present, so terribly many people have lost their homes, or have left them. Half the world seems in the wrong place. He mentions that they're having troubles. Not just with the low stores, but with goblins again. And this is really interesting. Well, it broke out again this autumn, worse than it has been for centuries. We have had several battles, and for a while my house was besieged. In November, it began to look likely that it would be captured, and all my goods, and that Christmas stockings would remain empty all over the world. I expect the goblins thought that, with so much war going on, this was a fine chance to recapture the north. They must have been preparing for some years, and they made a huge new tunnel which had an outlet many miles away. It was early in October that they suddenly came out in thousands. Polar Bear says there were at least 1 million, but that's his favorite big number. Anyway, he was still fast asleep at the time, and I was rather drowsy myself. So later, after the assault begins, we see that Polar Bear gets on the roof and fired rockets into the goblin hosts. That didn't stop them, so then Father Christmas says, I had to blow 3 blasts on the great horn, wind beam. If I've not told you about it before, it is because I've not had to blow it for over 400 years. Its sound carries as far as the north wind blows. All the same, it was 3 whole days before help came. Snow boys, polar bears, and hundreds of elves. They came up behind the goblins, and Polar Bear, really awake this time, rushed out with a blazing branch off the fire in each paw. He must have killed dozens of goblins. He says 1 million. First off, I just,
great.
Isn't it? I love how the horn has a name. Just like
yes, of course.
The Ulumuri and the Valaroma.
Yes, and the Valaroma. And it almost reminded me of the Horn of Helm Hammerhand.
Yeah,
too.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I love Polar Bear's tendency towards hyperbole. Millions.
Millions.
And then he must have killed 1 million.
Right. Yeah. It's great.
But the passage, go ahead.
Before you go on, I just found out. So Christopher Tolkien actually entered the RAF in 1943, but he was in flight training until 1945. It looks like.
Okay, so by the very end of the
he was commissioned in early 1945.
Okay, that's
so yeah. That would have been after this.
Yeah, that would have been. At least after this part, it would have been before the very end. But the very end is just a portion of the letter that he had written to Priscilla.
Okay,
so, and we haven't gotten to that part yet. This part continues, and we get, it was not until Polar Bear and a party of his younger relatives crept out by night and blew up the entrance to the new tunnels with nearly 100 pounds of gunpowder that we got the better of them for the present. Now, the first thing that really struck me about this was, and we kind of touched on this earlier, was, we got rockets, we've got gunpowder, we've got basically modern tools of war being used by the good guys this time. Usually those kinds of things, at least in the Legendarium, are used by the bad guys. The good guys stick with the older technology, right?
Right. Sure, yeah.
And
we see, obviously the main time that I can think of that we see gunpowder is at Helm's Deep.
Exactly.
But yeah, I guess Gandalf does use fireworks, but that's something much more innocuous than barrels of 100 pounds of gunpowder,
or rockets. Actually,
rockets, right?
Firing, shoulder-mounted RPGs from the top of the North Pole,
right? Yeah,
it's just interesting because we know Tolkien.
Man, now I'm imagining the Polar Bear with an RPG.
That's exactly what I'm picturing. Don't stand behind him,
right?
Oh, man. I don't want to read too much into that, but it's just interesting because in his work, most of the time, those things are bad, not good.
Yeah, good point.
But I love his recognition.
I wonder why. I wonder if maybe just because he was writing to his kids, maybe he felt like he needed to ground it a little bit more in something.
Yeah, maybe.
As opposed to trying to make it more of an idealized world.
They certainly would have known what rockets were,
Absolutely,
man.
And maybe that's it. Maybe, if they... my World War II chronology is not that great, but if they were already dealing with bombings and things like that, maybe this was a way of, like you said before with whooping cough, maybe it was a way of saying, this stuff happens at the North Pole too, and maybe it was a way of laughing at something that was actually quite horrific for them. Yeah,
that's he does that. He does find a way to take a horrific thing and kind of make it lighthearted. I'm thinking even of the moment in The Hobbit with the trolls. If you're looking at that just from a content perspective, the trolls are really talking about doing some very horrible things, but the way he puts it together makes it comedy gold.
Kind of fun, yeah.
My 4-year-old can listen to that and not be scared. Whereas if I took those same events and put them, in a less humorous, way, he'd have nightmares.
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
So, you were talking about normalizing things. I caught something earlier in one of your other letters. You mentioned mumps. I wondered if that.
That's right.
Somebody in the family had suffered mumps that year. But going on here, there's a recognition of polar bear's nature that I really love, that I think tells us a little bit about him. But, of course, he is a very magical animal, really, and goblins can't do much to him when he is awake and angry. I have seen their arrows bouncing off him and breaking. Well, now, those descriptions of him in battle, I know earlier I'd said he seemed like a conglomeration of Sam, Merry, and Pippin, but really, here he reminds me of Beorn.
Yeah.
Now Beorn's not absurd or, comically silly, but he's a bear, and he's magical, and he's tough, and goblins can't do much to him. So,
right.
Just saying. There's a little bit, there certainly seems to be a little bit of Beorn, and that makes sense. I mean, here we are, this is written in 43, so by this point, The Hobbit had been around for 6 years.
Right, that's true.
Why not,
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's interesting, yeah, a good catch.
So, it's just one of those things where it's like, I kind of see some Beorn there. I wonder if that was, purposeful or not. But I love the poignant moment at the end. And this is the end of the whole book. He says to Priscilla, essentially, I suppose after this year you will not be hanging your stocking any more. I shall have to say goodbye, more or less. I mean, I shall not forget you. We always keep the names of our old friends and their letters. And later on, we hope to come back when they are grown up and have houses of their own and children. And, I got to tell you, this actually brought tears to my eyes. I mean, now that I'm a father, I get the passage of time in a way that I never did before. And
I totally agree.
Yeah, I can see in my head, I can see in my mind's eye, my son and daughter, who are now 4 and 2, growing older and losing interests in something like this. I've already seen my son move on from things that I thought he'd really like for a few years, and I can kind of imagine writing this last letter to my little girl, knowing that this period of our lives is gone. And so I can just kind of I empathize with kind of that bittersweet feeling that must have been in Tolkien's heart as he wrote this last letter.
This last letter, yeah. I know. Yeah, I know that 1943 letter is just so sad. I mean, that sense of melancholy, just. But like you say, it's it's not a despair or anything like that. It's this is what happens. Your kids grow up.
It's bittersweet,
and every father knows that your little girl's going to grow up, your little boy's going to grow up, and seeing the last one.
No matter how many times I tell my son, stop growing.
Right.
And I do. I tell him that. It's like, man, you're like 4 going on 14. Dude, stop growing.
Yeah, I know. It happens so fast. And,
it does.
Neither of us is at this point yet with 3 grown children and 1 teenager. But
I know.
Just you can imagine how it's going to be.
All the memories that must
someday.
have been in his mind as he's writing these letters. This last letter, he's remembering and referencing all the old ones because, of course, he has to for continuity's sake. So, I'm sure the memories, it just must have been an amazing thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why it feels so incredibly personal, to really get a chance to read these. Yeah.
Can I just add on to that? Is that the last bit you've got?
Yeah, that's the last. That's it. Yeah.
Because in my edition, it does go on. There's a little bit more.
Goodness. Oh, wow.
I won't read it all, but there is one part. This one's, I'm just looking at it. I just have to read it.
Yeah, please do.
Father Christmas says, Polar Bear, too tired to write himself, so he says. And then Polar Bear's written in the margins, I am really. And it's just like, it underscores what you're talking about.
You can almost hear the sadness in Polar Bear too,
Yeah, I know. It's, man, I just... I don't know what to say about it that won't that would do it justice.
There's not really much to say. It's just really moving. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I mean that was a lot of fun. Bittersweet. Yeah. A lot of fun though, and hopefully we've inspired some of you listening to take a look at this lesser known so-called minor work of Tolkien's. It's so worth reading.
It really
is a lot of fun. It's very short. You can read it very quickly. And just like with any of his non-Middle-earth works, you really will be surprised in the little ways which it connects back to the Legendarium or makes you think of the Legendarium. We've only scratched the surface of that.
We really have. That's true.
But I don't know. I mean, Any other thoughts before we wrap up here, Alan?
Not really. This has been a really kind of a jolly time, and but it wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. We always thank you for joining us, but today we want to thank you especially for tuning in so close to the holidays. We hope we haven't taken you away from your families for too long.
Yeah, agreed. And please don't forget to tune in for our next special episode on Tuesday, January 3rd. That's when, in honor of Tolkien's 125th birthday,
my goodness,
Alan and I are going to be raising a toast to the professor, and we'll share our thoughts on Tolkien, a little tribute, and we'll also share some tributes that we've gotten from some of our listeners on what Tolkien means to them.
And we'll do our 2 giveaway drawings we've been talking about. So if you've submitted your thoughts, or if you've ever submitted a question to Bartleman's Bag, definitely tune into that one to see if you might be one of our lucky winners.
Definitely. And then after that, we'll get back to our regular bi-weekly Sunday schedule on January 15th with Chapter 18 of the Silmarillion, of the Ruin of Beleriand and the Fall of Fingolfin. We'll be starting the new year off with some fireworks in that chapter.
Fireworks indeed, like as a lightning shoots from under a dark cloud. All right, folks, Remember, if you need cheap paperbacks to mark up, please use the links on our library page at theprancingponypodcast.com. We also have links to audiobooks and music CDs and a few other cool things for your Tolkien collection.
And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe on iTunes, Google Play Music, leave us a review on iTunes, and we greatly appreciate your support. We're on Stitcher, TuneIn, and thanks to those of you who are connecting to us on social media, on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast, or on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
And social media is always a great place to share our podcast, too. So retweet us, share us, and tell your friends. One last thing, as always, please don't forget to send your questions, comments, or your list of ways that Tolkien has made you feel inadequate as a parent to the prancingponypodcast@gmail.com, and we'll try to get him into our next episode. Well, an hour and 45 minutes is still far too short a time to spend amongst such admirable listeners, but thanks again for spending it with us. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Yule for the Hobbits, and I guess for some of our Scandinavian listeners.
And happy holidays to you, whatever and however you celebrate.
And Happy New Year, and also happy birthday to Mrs. Man of the West and Mrs. Lord of the Mark, both celebrating a birthday around New Year's.
Our wives are both celebrating their birthdays coming up. So until next time.
Happy birthday.
Yep. So, indeed. Happy birthday indeed. We thank you for your patience and support. So folks, until next time.
Farewell, friends.